Since civil service exam preparation can go on for a very long time, it can go on for years and years, it's very, very important that you do not burn out during your preparation phase. It's your responsibility to ensure that your preparation journey becomes interesting. You have to make this preparation something like a playful activity, and it's only when you're able to do that your interest and curiosity knowing more remains intact. And using the supplement that comes with Hindu paper on Sundays, which goes by the name magazine, is definitely one way of how you can retain your interest in preparation. The newspaper that you read on all other 6 days of a week are useful for all the other parts of your general studies paper, but those aspects of your examination which cannot be addressed on all other 6 days can actually be addressed on the seventh day on Sunday, because it's from this magazine supplement your essay skills are improved. It's from this magazine supplement your personality test skills are improved. And not only that, some of the news that comes in magazine can also be beneficial to you in prelims as well. First, let's start with prelims. Every year in prelims examination, there is a very interesting question, one or two interesting questions which are asked based out of environment and ecology. For example, in 2020 prelims, there was a question that was asked about elephants. The question related to the gestation period of elephants, how long will an elephant be pregnant, and about the different behaviors of elephants. These are not normally aspects that we encounter in our environment classes or from your environment textbooks. But UPSC's method of asking questions from environment related to different species is turning out to be very interesting, at the same time challenging as well. So that's why you need to maximize your chances of exposure to such kind of news. And I'm sure most aspirants will not have the time to go and exclusively read news from environment related websites or magazines. So that's why one way of how you can maximize your exposure to environment related news is to keep a watch on the Sunday supplement that comes with Hindu. And yesterday's Sunday magazine supplement that came with Hindu had a very interesting read on seahorses, which are found in Mauritius. So, seahorses are marine animals, and it has various interesting traits to it. For example, it's the male of the seahorses which actually gives birth. It's not the females. The females actually, they do lay eggs, but they lay eggs in a pouch that is attached to the body of the male, and it is in the pouch where the incubation of the hatchlings happen. And so it's basically the male of seahorses which actually gives birth, right? So that's a very interesting aspect of seahorses. So there are many other aspects of seahorses which I mentioned there about its endangered status as per IUCN. So whether it is under critically endangered, or whether it's threatened, or whether it's extinct. So all such aspects were discussed in yesterday's article. So you should just read it as if you're interested in the tourism of Mauritius. You should read it from the perspective that one day you plan to visit Mauritius, and what's the travel itinerary you can make for yourself. When you think on those basis, your interest in reading this article is actually better. So you feel like you're a participant in this process rather than a disinterested audience who's just simply reading it for the sake of reading it, right? So learn all these methods through which you can stimulate interest. And especially when it comes to map sites, when it comes to world map areas, different countries, the best way to read about them, the best way to remember about them is to one day imagine that you will be planning to visit all these places, right? So yesterday's news that came in the magazine supplement regarding seahorses can be a very valuable way to maximize your exposure about seahorses. I'm not saying seahorses question is going to repeat next year in prelims, but what if it does? And just because you read this article, now you come to understand that in the Indian Ocean region seahorses are present. So that's an added benefit for you by reading this article, right? So this is how you ensure your maximization of exposure to all these kind of news articles. And out of the same article, another question can also be framed about the capitals of different island nations that are located in the Indian Ocean region. You have a lot of islands located in Indian Ocean region, and Bahrain is one, Maldives is one, Mauritius is one. So UPSC can actually ask you a question upon the different capital cities of the different island nations that are located in Indian Ocean region. You don't have to know about the capital of every island located in every different parts of the world, but at least Indian Ocean region, since India is located here, it's beneficial for you if you care to know about the capital cities of all these island nations. And these are not things that you have to memorize and mug up by taking a particular book or a notes and start mugging up. That's not the way how you do it. It's like when you encounter this news on Mauritius and now your interest is stirred up. So now when you read this article, now you get to understand Port Louis was the capital of Mauritius. There could be some other article on the tourism or on the threat that Maldives actually suffers because of ocean level increase. So when you come across such an article, you get to understand the capital of Maldives is Mahe, right? So that's how you slowly get to understand all these different aspects, which can also be asked as a question in your prelims examination. Generally, sports related news are not read by a majority of aspirants. 90% of aspirants do not even look at the sports column. And UPSC, true to its unpredictable nature, it occasionally it tends to ask a couple of questions from sports section. For example, in 2023 prelims, there were 3 questions asked from sports related news, right? So that's why I wouldn't advise that each one of you should start reading sports column, but if there is something unique happening in this particular year, let's say this is the year of Olympics, right? And this year's Olympics it has been planned to be organized in France. And so this magazine yesterday, it has a very interesting article on the sport of skateboarding, right? And just imagine, normally you would never even come across this sport called as skateboarding, but once in a year when you come across this news in magazine, that should be viewed as a way of how you can increase your awareness about this particular event. Until now you may be totally clueless about this particular event, even is one of a competitive sport which is included in the list of sports for Olympics. But you should know that in the year 2020, when the Tokyo Olympics was conducted, and that was the year when skateboarding for the first time was included as a sport in Olympics. And so the minute you start reading this article, when you get triggered to this idea, your mind should automatically start thinking about, oh, what other sports are yet not a part of Olympics. And and that's one way of looking at it. Then another way of looking at it is from seeing from the perspective of what other interesting sports which you might yet not be aware of, but which could be a part of this Olympics. For example, there's a very interesting game called as curling. Some of you would have even seen the visuals of the sport curling on YouTube, but you may not know the exact name of the sport called as curling, right? So I would just want you to go and search something about curling and to know something about it. And a very surprising aspect is kabaddi, which is played by significant Asian countries, is still not a sport that's included in Olympics, right? So these are the news items which you can actually encounter when you read this Sunday supplement magazine. These are not things that normally comes in your Hindu paper, but these are all areas for you to get to know something new that you do not normally encounter when you read your newspaper on other weekdays. Now that I have addressed the prelims utility of this supplement, let me just slightly move on to the mains related aspects. There are a lot of anecdotes, there are a lot of readers' experiences that they write in the Sunday magazine. Right, as a reader, you can narrate your life experiences, and if Hindu finds it worth publishing, they'll even publish it. So when you read the Sunday magazine supplement, you come across such stories, such interesting experience of others' lives, which actually, when you read, you will be able to put yourself in the shoes of the writer, and because of which you are able to borrow their life experiences and you make use of that to write interesting stories when you start your essay paper. So that's one direct use of how Sunday magazine can be put into use for improving your marks in essay paper. And for example, in yesterday's news article, there was a small write up about how women change their surnames after their marriage, right? And since surnames are not a common feature in South India, maybe South Indians may not be aware of that, but in North India, women, they take up the surnames of their husband's family once they get married to. So until a woman gets married, she could take the surname of her father's family. It could be Jyoti Sharma, but once married, she could probably take the surname of her husband, which could be Mishra. It could, so she would instead become Jyoti Mishra from there on. So this was an article which discusses about how this is a patriarchal thing, and this doesn't even spare even educated women as well. So we may assume that just because a woman is educated, she may be able to break herself free of patriarchal bondages, but which is actually not the case. Her identity is basically seen as an extension of her male family. So the entire identity of a woman is seen from the lens of the males which are who are a part of her lives. Until she's married, it's her father who's a bigger part of her life. So hence her identity is viewed from her father's side. And once married, her husband is the identity through which her life is measured, right? So all this indicates a certain patriarchal bent to our lives. So that is what this article actually addresses. So let's say in 2020 or 2019, I don't remember which year exactly it is, there was a question asked in an essay paper. The question goes on like this: the idea of new women is a myth, right? And so this is where such kind of examples can actually be used to really impress the reader. Imagine, so it's only when you read these kind of examples, it's when you read these kind of articles, the kind of writing that you employ in your essay paper becomes very original and distinct and unique to yourself, because most other aspirants would be writing very common examples, but whereas your examples would be something personalized of this nature, right? So it's by borrowing a segment of others lives, that's how you start enriching your content when you present your answers in your mains. Now, coming to the last aspect of this discussion, I find Sunday Magazine greatly enriching your vocabulary as well as your abilities to play with English. For example, a good figurative speech often employs the usage of idioms. So, what are idioms? Idioms are a set of words which convey a very distinct meaning than what they actually stand for. For example, we would have all heard of this idiom called as "it's raining cats and dogs." In reality, cats and dogs don't fall as rain, but it's a idiom, it's a phrase that's used to indicate that the rain is very heavy, right? If it's raining heavily, we call it as "it's raining cats and dogs." So "it's raining cats and dogs" should not be taken literally as what those words stand for, but it's a phrase which indicates a separate meaning of its own, right? So similarly, when you read the Sunday Magazine, so a lot of readers, they use all these kind of idioms. There are a lot of metaphors which you will encounter in your Hindu supplement magazine. So it's by reading all of that, you will slowly find out those idioms and metaphors, they all become a part of your normal conversation. Even when you interact with your friends, even when you interact with a quite educated audience, you start using these idioms as a part of your normal conversation. And that's how it turns out to be when you write your essays. These kind of idioms will find place here in the most appropriate places, right? So yesterday's Sunday Magazine, it has a very interesting idiom which I came for the first time in my life. So in the article that was written about the event of skateboarding, you will find that there was an idiom mentioned that "to cut through one's teeth." So what is the meaning of "to cut through one's teeth"? It simply means to have a first hand experience, right? So how did this idiom originate in the first place? It's because when babies first teeth, when it appears, it actually cuts through their gums, and that's how it erupts for the first time, right? So the learning that you happen to get for the first time, the first learning experience, is what is referred to as "to cut through one's teeth." So this is an idiom that you come across when you read the skateboarding article. So you will be able to use these kind of interesting idioms in your essays. You'll be able to use these kind of interesting references when you speak in your personality test, and that is what adds some spice to what you write and what you speak. So these are all the different use cases of yesterday's supplement that came with Hindu paper. So I hope you will start making use of these supplements from now on. Start enriching yourself and put in smart work which can become extremely rewarding in your mains as well as in your personality test.